There is a truth that most people don't want to hear, a truth that will make you uncomfortable, but if you stay until the end of this video, it can completely change the way you relate to love, to pain, to life itself. And it is this: everything you hold on to tightly dies in your hands. Everything you try to control slips away from you. Life has a cruel and beautiful paradox at the same time. And it is that only when you let go, when you stop squeezing, when you dare to open your hands, even if they tremble with fear, that's when things really start to happen. But I need you to tell me something right now. Leave your comment below telling me if you've ever felt that the more you held on to someone, the further they moved away. If you've ever held on so tightly that you ended up destroying the very thing you wanted to take care of, subscribe to the channel because what comes in this video is dense, it's profound, and I promise you, you won't come out the same. I had a patient, I'll call her Marcella, who came to my office with her eyes swollen from crying so much. She was about 42 years old and had been divorced for 3 years. She told me something that still resonates in my memory. "Gabriel, I did everything right. I was the best wife, the best mother, the best employee. I broke my soul trying to be perfect, and look where I am now, alone, empty, broken." I asked her what it meant to her to do everything right, and that's when she started to fall apart. It meant never failing, it meant always being there, anticipating what people needed, controlling every detail so that nothing goes wrong. Does that sound familiar? Because to me, it sounds like millions of people I know, who I see walking down the street with that stiffness in their shoulders, with that look of someone who carries the whole world and can't afford to let go for a second. Marcella didn't realize it, but what she called doing everything right was actually a desperate attempt to control the uncontrollable. And that, believe me, is the perfect recipe for suffering. Control is a beautiful and dangerous illusion. We feel like if we do things a certain way, if we behave well, if we meet all expectations, then life will give us back what we deserve. But life doesn't work that way. Life isn't fair, it doesn't negotiate, it doesn't understand merits. Life just is, and when we go about trying to control it, all we achieve is exhausting ourselves, breaking down, and losing sight of the only thing that really matters: living. Freud spoke of the pleasure principle and the reality principle. The first is what pushes us to seek immediate gratification and to avoid pain at all costs. The second, on the other hand, is what allows us to accept that not everything is as we want it to be, that there are limits, that frustration is part of the game, but there is something even deeper that is not always said. Neurosis, that suffering that paralyzes us, arises precisely when we refuse to accept reality, when we insist that things be as we decide and not as they are. Letting go is not surrendering. I have to clarify that right away because it is one of the biggest misunderstandings I hear in my office and in everyday life. I have been told, "Gabriel, if I let go, if I stop fighting, then that's it, I surrender, I accept that all is lost." No, brother, no. Letting go is not throwing in the towel. Letting go is understanding that there are things that are not under your control and that holding on to them only hurts you. Letting go is recognizing that life has its own rhythm, its own time, and that you can do everything right and still have things not turn out the way you expected. Think about this. How many times have you held on to a relationship that was already dead? How many times have you insisted on a job that made you sick, on friendships that emptied you, on dreams that were no longer yours, but imposed by others? And there you continued holding on tooth and nail, believing that if you let go you would fall into the void. But the truth, the hardest and most liberating truth at the same time, is that you are already experiencing that emptiness. You just don't realize it because you are too busy holding on to something that is actually dragging you down. Marcella began to understand this little by little. In a session, she told me that when she was little, Her father left home without warning. One day he was there and the next he was gone, and when she was barely 7 years old, she promised herself that she would never let anyone leave again. She was going to be so good, so perfect, that no one would have a reason to leave. Do you see what happened there? A 7-year-old girl took on a responsibility that wasn't hers. She believed that if she was enough, she could control the decisions of adults. And that belief, that unconscious pact she made with herself, stayed with her throughout her life. The unconscious doesn't forget, it stores everything, promises, fears, wounds, and then acts from there, from that place that we don't see, that we don't control, but that determines a huge part of what we do. That's why it's so important to become aware, look inward, and ask ourselves why we do what we do, because if we don't, we'll be living automatically, repeating patterns that we don't even know exist. Did you know that there are studies in psychology that show that people who have a greater need for control tend to experience higher levels of anxiety and depression? It's no coincidence. When you live trying to control everything, what you're really doing is fighting against the very nature of existence, which is uncertain, unpredictable, and sometimes painful, and that fight consumes you. I'm going to tell you something personal. There was a time in my life many years ago when I also fell into that trap. I was in a relationship that was paying off, but I didn't want to see it. I did everything. I planned outings, surprises, deep conversations. I put so much energy into keeping that relationship alive that I forgot to ask myself if I really still wanted to be there. And the other person, of course, would distance themselves even more because when one clings, when one tries to hold on by force, what it generates in the other is overwhelm, a desire to escape. One day after a particularly grueling argument, I was alone in my apartment and I started to cry, not out of anger, not out of frustration, but out of exhaustion. I was tired of fighting, I was tired of pushing hard, and at that moment, without realizing it, I let go. I said, "That's it, if he has to go, let him go, I can't take it anymore." And you know what happened? Nothing. Nothing magical happened. There was no triumphant return or movie-worthy reconciliation. The relationship ended the same. But what changed radically, was me, because for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace, because I understood that letting go wasn't losing, it was freeing myself. Now I want you to think about something. What are you holding on to right now that's really weighing you down? Don't rush to answer. Let the question resonate. It could be a relationship, a grudge, an expectation about how your life should be, a fear that comes from childhood. Whatever it is, it's there taking up space, consuming energy, and as long as you hold on to it, there won't be room for anything new to come. Because here's the key, the revelation I promised you at the beginning. When you let go, what you want doesn't magically appear to you. It doesn't work like a request to the universe. It works in another way, more subtle and more powerful. When you let go, you change, you become lighter, more open, more available, and from that different place, from that new version of yourself, you begin to perceive things that you didn't see before, to connect with opportunities that you previously passed by, to relate to people in a more genuine way. Love, for example, what does love mean? No, how much unnecessary suffering due to not understanding a basic truth. Love is not withheld, it is offered. Love is not a possession, it is a bond. And bonds, real, deep bonds, are built in freedom, not in the prison of control. I had a patient, I'm going to call him Esteban, who was always jealous, obsessed with knowing where his partner was, who they were talking to, what they were doing, and he would say to me, "I love her so much that I can't lose her." I replied, "Esteban, what you call love is fear, and fear kills everything." Jealousy, that daily torture, is born from the fear of loss, the fear of not being enough. But notice the paradox. When you are jealous, when you control, when you watch, you are destroying the very thing you want to preserve. Because no one can love in the midst of constant suspicion, lack of trust, the feeling of being imprisoned. Love needs air, it needs space, it needs freedom, and that implies risk. Sure, it implies that the person can leave, but if they stay out of obligation, guilt, or fear, is that love or is it something else? Let me tell you something that sometimes surprises you. In couples therapy, one of the most difficult exercises I propose is imagining life without the other person, not as a threat, but as a real possibility. And many resist, they get angry. But how can I imagine that if I want the relationship to work? They tell me. And that's the problem. If you can't even imagine yourself without the other person, if the mere idea paralyzes you, then you're not in a loving relationship, you're in a relationship of dependency. And dependency, my friend, is not love. It's a cage where both are trapped. Letting go also involves grieving what wasn't, the love that didn't happen, the child we couldn't have, the job we lost, the family we would have liked but didn't have. Grief is not an illness, it's the price of love. It's the process that allows us to process a loss, integrate it, and move forward without denying what hurt. But there are people who don't grieve, who get stuck in the wound, revisiting it over and over again, as if by touching it they could change the past. And it can't be done. The past is immutable. The only thing you can do is change your relationship with it. I remember an older patient, Mrs. Carmen, who after 30 years was still talking about her ex-husband with a fresh hatred as if the divorce had happened yesterday. I don't forgive him for what he did to me. Session after session I would tell her, Carmen, resentment is like taking poison hoping it will hurt the other person. The only one poisoned is you. Quote, not forgiving is not punishing the other person, it is chaining yourself to a past that no longer exists. It is denying yourself the possibility of letting go, of closing, of opening up something new. Forgiving. Mind you, it is not saying that what happened was okay, it is not justifying, it is not forgetting. Forgiving is saying, what happened happened, it hurt, it left its mark on me, but I am not going to give it any more power over my present. It is an act of personal liberation, isn't it? A concession to the other person. And here comes something I want you to understand. Letting go is not a one-time act, it is not something you do once and that's it. Letting go is an ongoing exercise, it is a decision that you have to make over and over again, because the natural tendency, especially when we are afraid, is to grab on again, to regain control. It is like learning to swim. At first it seems impossible. Your instinct tells you that if you let go of the edge you will sink. But when you finally dare, when you trust, you discover that your body floats, that the water supports you. Life also supports you, even if you do not feel it, even if it seems to you that if you let go you will fall apart. The truth is that you are already falling apart while you continue clinging to what is not working. And letting go in that context is not falling deeper, it is starting to rise. There was a psychologist named Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, who wrote an extraordinary book called Man's Search for Meaning. Frankl said something that I think is revolutionary. We cannot avoid suffering, but we can choose how to respond to it. We can find meaning. And when you find meaning, the pain doesn't go away, but it becomes bearable, it transforms. What's the point of letting go? What's the point of giving up control? The meaning is to reclaim your life, to stop living based on what you can't change and start living based on what you can. And what you can always do, in any circumstance, is choose your attitude. You can choose bitterness or hope, rigidity or flexibility, fear or courage. This isn't cheap positivity. I'm not selling it to you as if it were easy. It's not. It's extremely hard. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever have to do in life. Accepting that you can't control others, that you can't avoid pain, that you're going to lose things and people you love. But that acceptance, that letting go of the reins of the impossible is also the most liberating act there is. Let me tell you another story. A patient of mine, Joaquin, a successful businessman, came to my office after his second heart attack. He was 53 years old, had 3 businesses, 2 failed marriages, and not a moment of peace. He told me, "Gabriel, I built all this with my own hands. I can't let up." Quote. Well, I asked him, "Did you build all this or did it build you?" He remained silent because the truth is that he didn't control his empire. He controlled his empire. He was a slave to his own creations, incapable of letting go of a single aspect, incapable of delegating, incapable of trusting. I suggested something that seemed ridiculous to him. Take a week off from work, without a cell phone, without anything, just being. "I can't," he replied immediately. "You can't or you don't want to," I insisted. Because many times we say, "I can't," when in reality what we have is fear, terror of what could happen if we're not there controlling every detail. It took him 6 months to get the courage, 6 months of therapeutic work so that he could give himself that permission. And when he finally took that week, he told me something he didn't expect. Businesses kept operating, the world didn't collapse, people did their jobs, and for the first time in decades he could simply breathe. The question I leave you with is, what would happen if you let go a little? What would happen if you trusted? I'm not talking about blind, naive trust. I'm talking about a trust based on the acceptance that you can't control everything and that this isn't a weakness, it's reality. Now, there's something even deeper that I want us to understand together, because this isn't just psychology, it's not just self-help, it's something that has to do with the very structure of human desire. Kahn, another great figure in psychoanalysis, said that desire is always the desire of the other, that is, we desire what we think the other wants, we want to be desired by the other. And in that movement, in that permanent search for recognition, for validation, we lose ourselves. How many times have you changed your personality, your tastes, your opinions to please someone? How many times have you betrayed your own desires to fit in with what you thought the other person expected of you? And then, when that person leaves or when you realize that they never really saw you, what is left? Someone who no longer even recognizes themselves remains, someone who faded away in the attempt to be for someone else. Letting go also means letting go of that constant need for approval. It means daring to be who you are, with your flaws, with your contradictions, with your fears. And it means trusting that if someone doesn't choose you as you are, they simply aren't for you. And that's okay. Not everyone has to love you, not everyone has to validate you. In fact, constantly seeking everyone's approval is the quickest way to never have it, not from others or your own. I had a young patient, she was 28 years old, who came to me because she felt empty. She had everything you need, a stable partner, a good job, a fit body, travel, Instagram photos, but she would tell me, "I don't know who I am. I feel like I live for the photo, for people to like me, for people to tell me I'm okay." Quote. I asked her when was the last time she did something just because she liked it without thinking about what others would say. She didn't know how to answer. We live in an age where everything is exposed, where everything is measured in virtual approval, in numbers, in comparisons. And that's making us sick because we're forgetting the essentials, that life is not a showcase, that your value is not measured in likes, that happiness is not a perfect photo. When happiness comes, it's much simpler and much less Instagrammable than we think. Letting go is also letting go of that slavery to the gaze of others. It's turning off the external noise a little and starting to listen to the internal noise, which is the only one that matters. What do you want? Not what your parents want for you, not what society expects, not what fashion or the market dictates. What do you want? And if you don't know, that's okay. It's okay not to know. It's okay to be lost. It's okay to make mistakes. What's not okay is living on autopilot, repeating other people's recipes, waiting for happiness to come at some point as a reward for having behaved well. Happiness doesn't just happen. Happiness is built, chosen, practiced, and often involves letting go, giving up things you thought were essential only to discover they weren't. It involves losing in order to win. It involves dying a little in order to be reborn differently. Grief, the process I was talking about earlier, isn't just for the dead. We grieve for everything we lose. Youth, dreams, relationships that end, projects that don't prosper, the versions of ourselves that we no longer are. And every grief is an opportunity for transformation if we dare to go through it instead of avoiding it, but we avoid it as best we can, with work, with alcohol, with toxic relationships, with social media, with whatever distracts us from the pain. Because it hurts, of course it hurts. It hurts to let go. It hurts to acknowledge that something is over. It hurts to accept that we are not all powerful, that we cannot avoid loss, that life does not negotiate. But do you know what hurts more? Living clinging to what is no longer there, living in the past, in the is, in resentment, in nostalgia that paralyzes you. That hurts more because it is a pain with no way out, a pain that perpetuates itself, that feeds on itself. I propose an exercise here. Now think of something that you are holding on to and that you know you should let go of. It could be a relationship, a resentment, guilt, a fear, whatever. And ask yourself, what is the worst that could happen if I let it go? Don't idealize it, don't dramatize it. Really think about it. What's the worst part? Many times you'll discover that the worst part isn't as terrible as you thought, or that even in the worst part there's a door to something better. And then ask yourself the opposite. What's the best part that could happen if I let go? Because that's the other side, the side we don't see when we're paralyzed by fear. Letting go opens up possibilities. Letting go frees up your energy to invest in something else. Letting go allows you to move, change, and grow. There was a philosopher Heraclitus who said something about 2,500 years ago that still holds true. No one steps in the same river twice. Why? Because the river is never the same, and neither are you. Everything flows, everything changes. And trying to hold on to something that is naturally changing is trying to hold the river back with your hands. Life flows, and you can go with the flow, or you can resist it, grab onto the rocks at the bottom, and claw to keep from moving forward. But the river will remain the same, and all you'll achieve is hurting your hands. Now, letting go doesn't mean not caring, it doesn't mean indifference. This is another misunderstanding. Sometimes they tell me, if I let go of my partner, if I don't love them, if I don't control them, then I don't care. False. True love cares, but it doesn't imprison. True love trusts, but it's not naive. True love commits, but it doesn't cancel itself. And above all, true love understands that the other person is free, that they can leave, that they can choose differently, and still love them. That's true love, loving someone who is free, not someone who is there because they have no choice. And that requires enormous strength, a strength that can only be built from self-love, from the certainty that you two are complete, that you don't need the other person to exist, but that you choose them to share. I had a patient, Graciela, who after a devastating divorce came to me with the conviction that she would never love anyone again. It's not worth it, she told me. It's not worth suffering like this. And I would answer, you're right, it's not worth suffering like that. But did you suffer because you loved or because you didn't let go when you had to let go? Quote. He stopped to think because his suffering hadn't been love itself, but clinging to a relationship that was already broken, insisting where there was no answer, refusing to see the obvious. Love doesn't always save, sometimes, but what you want isn't love, it's the wrong way to love. Possessiveness, dependency, control, healthy love, the love that nourishes. That love that we all seek and few find, is a love that is built on freedom. And freedom implies risk, it implies that it may not work, it implies that you will suffer, but it also implies that if it works, if it flows, it is real. Do you remember when you were a kid and you played without worrying about the outcome? You played just because it was fun, because at that moment there was nothing more important than that game. Then you grew up and were taught to worry about the outcome, to weigh everything, to calculate risks, to protect yourself, and little by little you lost that ability to surrender, to play, to live without so much control. Letting go is returning to that state a little. It's not being irresponsible, it's not being naive. It's recovering the ability to live with less fear, with more dedication, with more confidence that no matter what happens, you'll be able to handle it. Because there's another truth here. You're stronger than you think. You've survived everything you've lived through up until now. You've gone through losses, disappointments, pain, and you're still here. You're still standing, maybe hurt, maybe tired, but standing. And if you could handle all that, you'll be able to handle whatever comes. Fear makes us believe that we're fragile, that we're going to break, that we won't be able to, and we live from that fear, taking so much care of ourselves that we miss out on life. But the truth is that we're much more resilient than we think. We are capable of adapting, of rebuilding ourselves, of finding meaning even in the most painful things. I'm going to tell you something that happened to me. A few years ago, I lost someone very important to me. I won't give details because they are private, but what I can tell you is that this grief tore me apart. There were days when I couldn't get out of bed, days when life seemed unbearable, and that's when I understood, from the body, from the deepest pain, what I always told my patients, that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Pain is what you feel when you lose something or someone. It's legitimate, it's real, it's necessary. Suffering, on the other hand, is what you add yourself. Resistance, the "it shouldn't be like this," the "why me," the wallowing in the pain without allowing yourself to go through it. And I realized that I could stay there suffering or I could go through the pain and come out the other side transformed. I chose the latter, not because it was easier, but because I felt that the person I had lost deserved for me to continue, to truly live, not just survive. And in that grieving process I discovered something. Letting go is not forgetting, letting go is integrating, it is taking that person or that experience to a different place inside you, not as an open wound, but as a scar that reminds you of what you lived. And when I let go, when I was finally able to say goodbye, things began to come to me, not magically, not as a reward, but because I changed, because I made space, because I became more open to life. Projects arrived, people arrived, opportunities arrived, but above all, peace arrived. And peace, brother, inner peace is the most precious asset there is. Peace is not the absence of problems. Peace is the certainty that no matter what happens, you will be okay. It is trust in yourself, in your ability to adapt, to survive, to find meaning. And that peace is not bought, it is not inherited, it is not given away, it is built day by day, decision by decision, every time you choose to let go instead of holding on. Now I know that there are people who will tell me, Gabriel, what you're saying is all very nice, but I can't. I have a family to support, a job that makes me sick but that I can't leave, a complicated relationship with children in the middle. I can't just let go, and I understand you. I understand you perfectly because life is not as simple as the motivational phrases that circulate out there, but here's the thing. Letting go doesn't always mean leaving, it doesn't always mean ending something. Sometimes letting go means changing your attitude towards that which you can't change. It's letting go of expectations, anger, frustration. It's accepting that things are the way they are, not the way you wanted them to be. And from that acceptance, doing the best you can with what you have. Viktor Frankl, whom I told you about earlier, was in a concentration camp. He couldn't leave, he had no way of controlling his situation, but he could control his attitude, his way of making sense of that horror. And that's what saved him, not only physically, but above all else, all mentally. He chose how to position himself in the face of the inevitable. You too can choose, you can always choose something, no matter how small. You can choose not to carry resentment, you can choose to set boundaries where possible, you can choose to seek help. You can choose to change your perspective on what happens to you. And those small choices accumulated over time end up transforming you. This reminds me of something Karjan wrote. What you resist persists. In other words, the more you fight against something, the more present it is in your life. The more you try not to think about something, the more you think about it. The more you resist feeling an emotion, the more it dominates you. Resistance perpetuates the problem. Letting go is what you have to resist. It is accepting, allowing, flowing. It is not that you like what is happening, it is not that you approve of it. It is simply recognizing that it is happening and that your resistance is not going to change it, it is only going to wear you down. A patient of mine, Rosa, had an addicted son. She had been trying to save him for years. Hospitalizations, therapies, pleas, threats. Everything and nothing worked. She came to see me devastated, feeling guilty, feeling like a failure as a mother, and after several months of work, she came to a painful but liberating conclusion. She couldn't save him. Her son had to choose to save himself. Letting go, in her case, was letting go of a responsibility that wasn't hers. It was understanding that love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself to the point of destruction. It was setting boundaries, taking care of herself, and trusting that her son would find his own way when he was ready. And you know what happened? When she let go, when she stopped chasing him, when she stopped begging him, her son was finally able to look at himself and realize that he needed help. It wasn't immediate, it wasn't magic, but it happened. Because sometimes our suffocating love, our control, our need to save the other person, all it does is prevent them from taking care of themselves. We take away their responsibility, we take away their chance to grow, and then we wonder, why doesn't he change? Letting go is also letting go of the need to save everyone else. World. It means understanding that everyone has their own process, their own times, their own responsibilities. You can be there, accompany, support, but you can't live someone else's life for them. And this goes for everything: partners, children, parents, friends. You can't force anyone to change. You can't convince anyone to be happy. You can't avoid anyone's pain, and trying to do so will only frustrate and suffocate them. Think of a plant. You can water it, give it light, fertilize it, and take care of it, but you can't force it to grow. You can't pull on its leaves to make it grow faster. All you'll achieve is to break it. The plant grows at its own pace, according to its nature, and your job is to give it the conditions, not to force the process. The same with people, the same with yourself. You can't force yourself to be someone you're not. You can't rush through processes that take time. You have to respect yourself, you have to give yourself space, you have to trust that if you keep doing your inner work, things will start to fall into place. Now, there's something else I want you to understand. Letting go doesn't exempt you from responsibility. I'm not saying that you should disappear from your life, that you should leave everything to chance, that you shouldn't do anything. I'm saying that you should do what you have to do, but without the burden of total control, without the illusion that everything depends on you. Freud spoke about repetition. He said that we tend to repeat unresolved conflicts from the past in our current relationships. It's as if the unconscious were trying to resolve those old wounds, but instead of resolving them, it perpetuates them. That's why you end up always dating the same type of person, even if they look different. That's why you always get into the same work conflicts. That's why the same family dynamics are repeated generation after generation. And the only way to break that repetition is by becoming aware, looking inward, asking yourself why you do, what you're repeating, what unmet need you are trying to fill in a way that doesn't work. And that work of self-knowledge is the bravest and most difficult thing you will do in your life, because it involves facing your shadow, that part of yourself that you don't like, that you would rather not see. It involves acknowledging your mistakes, your fears, your wounds, and no one wants to do that. We prefer to project onto others, blame them, play the victim. It's easier, more comfortable, but it gets you nowhere. Letting go is also letting go of the need to be right, for things to be the way you want, to control the narrative. Sometimes you're not right, sometimes you messed up. Sometimes your version of the story is not the only truth, and that's okay, because acknowledging that doesn't make you weaker, it makes you more human. I had a patient, Martin, who came to couples therapy with his wife, and every session was the same. He was arguing why she was wrong, she was defending herself, neither of them really listening to each other, until one day I asked him, "Martin, do you want to be right or do you want to be right? Happy?" He was speechless because he had never thought about it that way. How many useless arguments do we have just because we don't want to lose, because we don't want to give in? How much energy do we waste defending our pride instead of building something genuine? Letting go of pride, letting go of the need to always be right, is one of the most liberating acts there is. Because pride is a shell, it protects you. Yes. But it also isolates you, keeps you separate, distant, unable to truly connect. And deep down, pride is fear. Fear of showing yourself vulnerable, fear of being hurt, fear of not being enough. But when you let go of that shell, when you dare to show yourself as you are, two things happen. Either people walk away and then they weren't for you, or they really come closer, and that's when you build something real. This brings me to another point, loneliness. What fear do we have of loneliness, right? How many people stay in horrible relationships simply so they don't have to be alone? How many people surround themselves with pseudo-friends, noise? Anything that covers up the silence? Because silence is scary, because in silence you find yourself, and many times you don't like what you see. But solitude is not the enemy. Solitude can be the space where you finally reconnect with who you are, where you ask yourself the questions you've avoided your whole life, where you process what you didn't process, where you heal what you didn't heal. Solitude can be a refuge, a place to reconnect with yourself. Of course, I'm not talking about chronic isolation, the loneliness that hurts because it's imposed on you because you didn't choose it. I'm talking about the ability to be alone, without feeling empty, to enjoy your own company, to not depend on others to feel complete, because when you can be alone and be okay, only then can you truly be with someone else. Only then do you choose the other person because you love them, not because you need them to fill a void. And that's the difference between a healthy relationship and a dependency disguised as love. Letting go is daring to be alone when it's time for you to lack. It's not clinging to relationships that are no longer nourishing just out of fear of loneliness. It's building a solid relationship with yourself first, because if you don't support yourself, if you don't love yourself, you'll always be begging for love outside, looking for love from others that which only you can give yourself. And mind you, this doesn't mean being self-sufficient to the point of not needing anyone. Relationships are fundamental. We are social beings, we need each other. But there's a huge difference between needing each other to enrich yourself and needing each other to survive.